Hello, today I'm going to be doing a review of Starkid's latest musical, Cinderella's Castle, and I'm going to try and talk relatively quickly and get to the point because I have a lot of opinions. Now, for those who don't know, Starkid is a theatre company that are well known for putting on musicals and making them freely available on the internet, on YouTube, so you can go and watch them for free. And they're well known for doing parody musicals and have their own particular style of humour and shenanigans. But if you're watching this, then I assume you already know that. Now, just to preface that this will contain spoilers for Cinderella's Castle, so if you don't want to be spoiled, go to Starkid's YouTube channel and you can watch Cinderella's Castle, then come right back here. The other thing that I want to say is that I am a really big fan of Starkid, okay? So anything that I say that is a little bit, maybe more on the negative side, it is said with love. I have been a mega Starkid fan for well over 10 years now, and I'm actually going to see them in concert in London this very weekend, so I'm a really big fan, and everything I say with love. And the last preface is that if you don't know me, my name's Sarah and I write musicals, so I'm definitely coming at this from a writer's perspective, and I really view things through a story lens, and that's going to be what my point of view is sort of based on. Okay, that is the intro out of the way. Let's get onto the review, but I first want to discuss the hopes and expectations I had for this show based on the Kickstarter campaign and all of the information that I knew before the show. I believe that Cinderella's Castle was set to be one of Starkid's best shows yet, because before Cinderella's Castle, Starkid had spent a lot of time in the Hatchetfield universe. Starkid's first Hatchetfield show was in around 2018, and Starkid's latest Hatchetfield show was in 2023, so that is 5 years in the Hatchetfield universe. And while personally I didn't love the Hatchetfield vibes, I could still really respect Starkid's desire to tell original stories, and I also kind of respected this mega multi-musical parallel universe thing. It was ambitious, it was fresh, and it was kind of exciting. But as I said, we'd done Hatchetfield after Hatchetfield after Hatchetfield, and with the announcement of Cinderella's Castle stepping away from that Hatchetfield universe, I was really excited for something different, and a part of me felt like Starkid was stepping back to their roots, which is in parody and adaptation, and going into this well-known source material of Cinderella and Starkidifying it, making it Starkid-esque, and I was really excited to see what they came up with for Cinderella's Castle. Not only was the source material exciting to hear about, but their funding campaign through Kickstarter was also really exciting and well put together. They had an excellent lineup of content and live streams and things that they were announcing about the show, and I was absolutely following along. I watched so many of those live streams as they revealed details about the show, and it all sounded really exciting. The best part about their fundraising campaign is that they smashed goal after goal after goal, and they smashed stretch goal after stretch goal, and they amassed such an impressive budget, and I knew that they were going to be able to put on a really beautiful, well-produced show just due to the amount of funds that they had available to them from the funding campaign. The details that we got was so exciting. It was going to be a Cinderella story, but set in like an 80s dark fantasy kind of vibe, which was like, oh yeah, cool. And it was going to have puppets. Now, I am a massive fan of puppets. I love the Muppets, and I also love Starship, one of Starkid's very early shows that has a lot of puppets. And again, I was like, oh, they're going back to their roots. This is going to be amazing. There's going to be fantasy puppets. It's going to be absolutely incredible. But there was only one detail about the show that was revealed that made me a little bit nervous, and that was that the music was going to be composed and written once again by Jeff Blim. Now, as I mentioned, before Cinderella's Castle, Starkid had done 3 Hatchetfield shows, and all of these 3 shows were composed by Jeff Blim. This is around sort of the time where I started to sort of feel like Starkid wasn't really doing it for me in the same way that I had really loved their earlier material, and I had kind of put this down to the music. The Hatchetfield music is okay, and I think it starts off, you know, pretty decent with the guy who didn't like musicals, but I feel like every single show Jeff Blim writes music for, the music just kind of gets worse and worse and worse. So I was a little bit nervous, and I heard the demos on the live stream. For Cinderella's Castle, and I thought, okay, I don't love this again, but maybe I'm judging too fast. Like, maybe when it's with the actual band and the actors singing it and the actors, you know, putting their own spin on it, maybe this will be okay. So I thought I will definitely try to have an open mind and still stay really, really excited for this show. If I'm being 100% honest, I was kind of hoping that Starkid would branch out and try collaborating with a different composer for Cinderella's Castle. I think over the years, Starkid have done so many different shows with so many different vibes, and one thing that I really like is that on so many of their different projects, they have worked with different writers of the music, and I think that has created a different like style and world and vibe for each of their shows, and I think that's been really fun. And I know that Jeff Blim has done the music for those past 3 Hatchetfield shows, which is a long stint of same composer, same composer, same composer, but I could kind of understand, because if you want to keep the music sort of similar for that Hatchetfield world, so I could kind of understand. But I was hoping that with them branching out to do something a little bit different with Cinderella's Castle, that they would also branch out in terms of the composer and try and go for a different style, working with somebody who can create a different sound. Even back in the early days when Starkid was working with Darren Criss to write most of the music, Darren Criss was still collaborating with people like A.J. Holmes and Carlos Valdez, and there was still different influences and flavors and sounds, and all of the shows felt unique and different, and we got to hear some really great musical stylings from so many wonderful composers over the years. So in recent Starkid history, I do feel it's been a bit Jeff Blim, Jeff Blim, Jeff Blim, Jeff Blim, and as I said, I can kind of understand with keeping it contained in the Hatchetfield universe, but Cinderella's Castle felt like an opportunity that they could try working with somebody different and creating a whole different unique vibe for this show. And unfortunately, in my opinion, they didn't do that. They clearly really enjoy working with Jeff Blim, which is great, and if it works for them, it works for them. But I was just a little bit disappointed that they didn't take that opportunity to do something different. Okay, so then I watched the show, and we're now going to talk about my review of the show. I'm going to break it down into a few different categories, starting with what I really liked, then we're going to talk about the music, then we're going to talk about the writing structure and the characters, and then make sure you stick around to the end because I'm going to tell you what I would have done differently that I feel would have made it a much better show. So I'll give you the whole play-by-play of how I would have reimagined it to make the story even better. So make sure you stick around for that. Starting off with what I liked. Obviously, I loved the puppets. The puppets were amazing, and I am a massive fan of puppets. The puppets were really beautifully designed, they were really well done, and they were really well performed by the actors. I do think some of the puppets could have been utilized a little bit more, but overall, the puppets were really, really strong part of the show. Secondly, I really loved the costumes, with a special shout out to this amazing glowing light up dress. It was absolutely gorgeous, but all of the costumes were fantastic. And me as a theatre person, I knew that they were wearing wigs throughout the show, but my husband, who is not a theatre person, he didn't know that they were wearing wigs. And when Cinderella came out in the braids, my husband was just like, oh my gosh, how did they braid all of her hair in that amount of time? Like, he was just wowed. And so the wigs were really, really incredible as well. They were all just absolutely beautiful, and it made the show feel like it had a really good level of production quality. And going back to my earlier point, I think the budget really helped with that. It meant that the costumes were able to be fantastic. The puppets were able to be built really, really well, really, really beautiful. And the whole design of the show was absolutely spectacular. Moving on to talking about the set, this was also amazing. And they had these really clever sort of benches along the stage, and this was really well designed for the puppetry for characters like Crumb the mouse, so that he could be kind of stood on these benches, and other puppets like the dwarf as well, but also to conceal things, right? So when Cinderella gets her leg cut off, she's able to cleverly drape that over the edge and they can hold up the amputated leg. Or when the prince is beheaded, and then the fake head rolls over. So to hide these kind of elements and create this sort of stage magic feel. So I thought the set was really cleverly designed and really well used, and it looked really great as well. The performances and the performers were mostly really, really good, and it's really clear that Bryce, who is playing Cinderella, is absolutely phenomenally talented. Like, what a voice, what an actor, absolutely incredible. And the last thing that we really, really liked was the Sir Hopalot saying, "You're beaten," after he beats each of his enemies.
You're beaten! You're beaten! You're beaten!
And it was just honestly so funny, and the highlight of the show for me. It was just hilarious. I can't explain it. It was so funny. It was really, really great. Okay, that was what I really, really liked. Now we're going to talk about some stuff that I maybe liked a little bit less, and we're going to start off with the music. I'm sorry, it kind of sucked, and all of my apprehensions that I had in the lead up to the show, they all just kind of came true. I was worried about Jeff Blim as the composer, and it came true. I mean, it really sucked. The thing that I don't love about Jeff Blim's writing is that a lot of the music is just forgettable. It's not catchy enough, and it just does not move the story along. Every single time it got to a song in this show, it felt like the musical paused while they did a song, and then when the song finished, the musical kept going, and the music wasn't really well integrated into the story. It didn't push the story along most of the time. I also think that the music often doesn't match up with the lyrics, and it just feels like a bunch of random lyrics that hasn't really been crafted, and trying to push it and fit it and cram it to fit into the music. It feels very, very clunky. And also, I feel like with Jeff Blim, a lot of the time, the lyrics don't really mean anything, right? They're just words. They're just a fancy string of words that sound kind of cool, but they don't actually mean anything. They're not specific, they're not relevant, they're just cool, fancy words in a song. Let's just quickly talk about a few of the songs. Castle on a Hill, what a waste of time. I mean, yes, it's boppy. Yes, it is, you know, gonna get stuck in your head, which is more than I can say for most of the songs in this show. So I guess it gets points for that, but it really does nothing to set up this show for us, right? Castle on a Hill. The show is called Cinderella's Castle, and the opening song is Castle on a Hill. You would think that the castle is going to be somehow like really pivotal and important to this story, but it just kind of isn't. I'm not sure why the castle is important at this point. I'm not sure who owns the castle. I'm not sure how these village people feel about the castle or its owner. I'm not sure if the castle belongs to the king and the prince, or if the castle is like this house of Ashmore that stands on the hill and that's where the story's set. Like, nothing is clear in this moment. And the whole song just feels like kind of a waste of time. It's not really saying anything at all. Again, it's got this thing where it's just strings of words that sound cool, that don't do anything to set up the world, to tell us about the rules of the world, introduce any of the characters, anything. I'm just going to read you out a few of the lyrics here. Through a secret passageway where shadows dance and play, you're guided by wonder, you're guided by wonder. In the realm of fantasy, it's sort of a factory for stories that shudder and who really loved her. Like, it rhymes, it sounds cool and vibey, but like, this is telling me nothing at all. What secret passageway? What realm of fantasy? Like, what are the rules of this world? What are the things that are important to this story? And it is a real shame when you compare it with lyrics like this.
What remains of a man when that man is dead and gone? Only memories and stories of his deeds will linger on. What if a man's accomplishments aren't in the tale they tell? Are the deeds that go unheralded his legacy as well? If a war breaks out tomorrow, we'll all have hell to pay. Why protect my reputation? I'm a dead man either way.
Which is what we're used to seeing from Starkid in the past. This song, like many of the songs in the show, would really benefit from little gaps within the song where the piano or whatever is vamping underneath, and we get little scenes of dialogue where we get to start meeting these characters, setting up the world and introducing the story and the ideas interspersed within the song. Many of the songs would have benefited from this, and it would have really helped the song to push the story forward. Okay, we're going to skip over Cursed Crazy. We're going to talk about Step on Your Grave. This feels like it's trying to be Cinderella's I Want song, but we're already 30 minutes into the musical. That's like a quarter of the way through, and we're only just sort of touching on what Cinderella wants, and we're only on song 3, so it's just taking a little bit too long to get going. The song's okay, the song's fine. It's kind of setting up that what Cinderella wants is for these troll people in her life to die, but it's not really going into too much detail about why or the reason behind it. Like, these people about to want to, you know, step on their grave, whatever. It was okay, it was just like, meh. And then we get to, in my opinion, the best song in the whole show, which is with the 3 girls, and I think it's called something like Last Forever. And this was the first moment in the show where I was just like, oh, this is amazing. This is a great song. Like, wow, this is such an amazing moment. It was giving like Schuyler Sisters with their dresses and everything, and it was absolutely incredible. But I'm like, I'm 40 minutes into the show, right? It's too late for this to be the most, you know, the first amazing moment of the show. It was a really, really great song though. It was well written, it was catchy, it was well performed. It felt like it was progressing the story along throughout the song, where the character started at the start of the song to the end. It was completely different. It felt like a journey. It was amazing. Well done.
I've been thinking about this day as long as I remember all my life.
Facade, where the trolls are singing and the troll sisters have their new bodies. This was just a really hard, boring watch and listen. Like, the song just did nothing. It wasn't a pleasant sounding song, and I really would have loved to have seen the troll sisters get their new bodies and have to learn how to use them and being taught by the mother and have some kind of montage of them learning how to control this new body. And what comes to mind is the song from Bat Boy when they're teaching him how to become like a sophisticated guy, and like in the space of one song that character goes from, you know, not being able to speak at all to passing tests and getting, you know, qualifications and becoming really well-spoken individuals. So I would have loved to see some kind of like mini montage of the troll sisters like not knowing at all how to use this clunky body and their mum teaching them, and through the space of a song they can kind of like fit in with the humans and, you know, that kind of thing, like seeing progression. But it's just kind of like they get their bodies, they have fun playing around with their bodies, and then the musical pauses and they sing some song that doesn't do anything, and then the musical keeps going. The music really needs to do something for the story, because we don't have time in a musical to waste time. Like, every line is precious, every moment is precious. Every single moment has to do something. The Fairy Queen song was really, really nice, and it was a little bit catchy, but for an Act 1 finale, which I think is what it wasn't 100% clear in the YouTube video, but I think that was the Act 1 finale. It was just a little bit anticlimactic. All of the ensemble came and swirled around Cinderella, and I honestly thought we were going to get one of those like costume reveals where all the ensemble like hide and then they do the costume reveal and she was going to come out in her dress, and like that would have been such an amazing moment to end Act 1 on. But it didn't. They just swarmed around her and her head was poking out, and then it kind of ended. Like, I was like, okay, it wasn't even some like massive awesome note. A lot of the music ends very abruptly and very suddenly. It doesn't have those big awe-inspiring sounds. Like, maybe that's just the vibe they were going with the 80s dark fantasy, whatever, but it didn't feel satisfying. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about specific songs. Act 2, you know, it keeps going. It's more of the same. It's more of the same notes, really. We're going to move on now to talk about the writing, the characters, and the structure. So, first of all, straight up, the narrator is way too much, okay? The narrator, like, literally narrates every single scene. The opening of every single scene, the narrator is there. Like, giving this big spiel about la-di-da-di-da. It's like, you're wasting our time, right? You're telling stuff that we are seeing anyway. There were so many times when the narrator said stuff and then we literally were seeing the exact same thing the narrator was telling us.
Ella did as she was bid, dragging the poor Griswold girls into the dark of the wood.
It felt unnecessary. It felt like they were spoon-feeding the story rather than just letting us figure it out and experience it. I also was a bit worried that the narrator was just going to turn out to be a narrator and they weren't going to do anything interesting with that. I think if a show does have a narrator, that's fine, but I think you need to kind of make it interesting. I think a great example of this is in Firebringer, when the character, I think Molag, goes off to, you know, find the end of the earth or whatever, and ends up like narrating stuff to the audience and having that audience narrator connection. But it's an actual character from the show, and I thought the narrator, if you're going to be that involved and that big of a character and that into it, like, we need to have some kind of payoff for that time we've invested in the narrator. I think the narrator could have ended up being the dying king, or the narrator could have been Cinderella's long lost father, or it could have meant something in the end, but in the end it was just a narrator for the sake of narrator, and I just think cut it, it's unnecessary. I did not like the character of the prince. To me, it felt unoriginal. It felt a little bit like Aladdin from Twisted, where it's a character who you think is going to be moral and upstanding and turns out to be a lusty, disgusting pig. It didn't feel original, and it felt like a lot of the dialogue was just trying to like shock you with being super gross, and it didn't actually feel funny. It just felt like shock value gross.
Get it? She reached my balls. No, she's sucking my cock.
And I think a little bit of this is to do with the acting. I think that James is an incredible singer, an incredible dancer, and I really enjoyed his performance in other shows. And this was kind of like an opportunity to step up into a lead role and show what he's capable of. But unfortunately, it just kind of felt like not the best way to portray the character. It felt performed in an expected way. Like, if you read those lines, this is how you think it should be delivered. Whereas I feel like the prince could have had a funny voice, or like a funny mannerism, or could have really played more into like the stupid prince vibe and been more like stupid, bumbling, you know, try-hardy. Like, I'm not sure, but there needed to be some kind of angle to pull off that level of vulgarity, and there was no angle. It just felt, the delivery felt very expected, and I didn't laugh. I was just watching it and I was just not laughing, and I just thought, you know what, like, if somebody like Joe Walker or Joy Richter was like playing this role, they would find some kind of angle and way into the material, and I would be peeing my pants with laughter. Like, I know I would. And I hate comparing people in that way, but like, I just felt it was a little bland and a little unoriginal. And in general, I think there was a little bit too much shock value grossness, and this is from eating poop like to all of the sexual stuff, which often felt unnecessarily, like the way the stepmother was just like sleeping around and doing all this random stuff. Like, I'm like, why don't you hate humans? And all of the sexual stuff and the language, and it just kind of like, if it's really important to the story, I understand and I can totally get behind it. If it's done in a funny, clever, interesting way, it can totally be that out there. Even the violence, like cutting off her leg, like, I understand that it was meant to be intentionally very graphic and very violent, and I love the ambition of trying to do that on stage, but the way it was presented was just kind of like, what am I watching? Okay, because so much time was wasted on narration which we didn't need, and songs that did absolutely nothing for the story, it actually ate into so much time that I believe we did not get to spend enough time with the characters and develop them enough. So for example, Sir Hopalot and the Squire Crumb, these were two incredible characters that I really, really liked and really enjoyed spending time with, but they were only introduced right before the end of Act 1. Then we had their introduction, which was just very small in that little fairy queen scene. Then we had Cinderella telling them to leave the party and them doing a little bit of sword practice. Very, very short scene. Then we have Sir Hopalot coming in and doing his big sword fight sequence, which was amazing. And then it's pretty much they just come back for the finale to be like, yes, thank you, that's wrapping up the story. So that's only like really seeing these characters like 3 times, like some moments not even very big at all, and it's really not enough time to connect to these characters and feel satisfied at the end when their story concludes. So I would have liked to have spent a lot more time with Sir Hopalot and the Squire Crumb, and even go more into them, what they want, like their goals and desires. Like for Crumb, you know, I would have loved in that sword fight practice scene, you know, for him to be like, oh, like, I really want to be a knight one day, it's my one true dream, you know, and then at the end, when he becomes a knight, oh, it would have felt so good, so satisfying, do you know what I mean? But like, they didn't go into any of that at all about those characters, and for such amazing characters who were such main characters, they didn't sing at all. It's a musical. These are main characters. Like, what a wasted opportunity. I also think that the Troll sisters could have gone more into their story and wants and desires. They had the whole thing of Ransilda, I think, wanting to be the troll bridge with the riddles, and that was kind of loosely touched upon at the start and then loosely followed up on at the end, but it could have been much more baked into the story, and it could have affected the outcomes more. I think they really could have played that up more. Instead, we had 2 just generic, trollish, ugly stepsisters who were just generic sisters all the way through, who had their own little things, but you know, it didn't affect the story, and I would have loved, again, to have seen more musical moments going into this. So instead of these, again, generic songs with the 3 trolls just being like, I look good in this, I would have liked to have gone into, you know, I want to be a troll bridge because this, and my mother doesn't let me, and this, and to see the conflict within them. And I think it would have just been more interesting and more lovely to get some musical moments that really went into their internal world a bit more. At the end, when the troll turned to stone, I was just like, oh, that's how they were meant to kill the trolls, to turn them to stone through the sun or the trappings of starlight or whatever, and they were using the skin suits to protect themselves from the sun. Like, none of that was really clear enough, and I think that the opening, as I said, would have been a really good opportunity to set up the rules of the world, because yes, we all kind of know that trolls turn to stone in the sunlight, but I really don't think it was clear, and I think it could have been embedded a little bit more into Cinderella's like wants and desires. When she's talking about, I want to kill these trolls, I would have loved her to be more specific, like, my dream and my desire one day is to find a way to trick them out of their skin suits, out into the sun, and watch them turn to stone. You know, that for me would have really set up this specific desire and way of going about it, which would have felt satisfying in the payoff. But in the end, when the troll turned to stone, I was just like, oh yeah, like it just wasn't set up right, I don't think. Hello, it's editor Sarah here. When editing this video, I did go back and see that there was some information given about the trolls in the opening troll puppet monologue by the stepmother, but because the actor's face and body is covered and the voice effect, it was really hard to digest all of this on the first time viewing, and they use very flowery language. So they talk about a time when the sky was ash and the trolls roamed free until the thrice damned sun rose once more or something. It's very, very hard to follow, and I think such a major plot point can't just be thrown away in a few lines and expect us to get it. And I think there could have been a little bit more reference to fire with the whole like Ashmore, Cinderella. They were kind of trying to do it and the whole thing with the mum, but none of it was clear, and I just think there should have been a fire at some point. It should have come into it, like it just could have been milked a little bit more. Everything could have been milked a little bit more. It was just all just generic. Okay, so Cinderella comes back to life, but I was just like, what? That a character just coming back to life somehow is just so cheap, and it's just like it could be so much more interesting. And I think if you are going to do the whole character comes back to life thing, you have to do it right and do it well. I think that in Tangled, for example, when Rapunzel dies and, you know, the tear falls on her and it's the magic in the tear, whatever, like, you know, you're giving it a moment, you're turning it into a thing, you're giving it a reason, you're creating magic that has rules in that world. But Cinderella just kind of dies, and then with no explanation, she just kind of comes back. Another editor mentioned here that there is a little bit of information given in Cinderella's monologue when she first appears, saying that the spell was reintroduced when the slipper went on her foot, even though the foot was amputated, and therefore she was brought back to achieve her dream and her wish or whatever. But again, I don't think that you can expect audiences to get such an important major plot explanation just with a couple of lines in a monologue. It needs more, and I kind of stand by what I said, even though they have tried to include those details in the show. And it's just like, okay, that was very, very convenient. I would have loved it, and I'll talk more about this, if the Fairy Queen had have come back and brought her back to life for a reason. I kind of interpreted that Cinderella came back to life as the next sweet queen, fairy dream person, and in that I kind of inferred that the original Fairy Queen was her mum who had come back as the Fairy Queen, but like none of that was really, again, milked or clear. I think Cinderella just kind of came back in a convenient, non-explained way, and it was just kind of like, all right. I think Cinderella's goals, all in all, like many of the characters I've discussed, just wasn't really clear. She goes to the ball and it's all a bit confusing because she doesn't like the prince, but then she's flirting with the prince because she wants to make the trolls fail, but she doesn't really have a plan to kill the trolls, but she just wants them to not have what they want, which is the prince. But then and then they're like, oh, do you want to be queen? And she's like, oh, I don't know what I want. I hadn't really thought that far ahead. Like, I think a character has to really passionately want something and want something specifically. And then there was the Thaddeus scene, right? And the prince leaves and Thaddeus is with Cinderella, and all of a sudden there's just like all these sparks on stage and all this chemistry. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Like, more of the show should have been exploring this. But I just feel like, oh my gosh, the whole Thaddeus-Cinderella dynamic was so incredible, but we just didn't spend enough time with it because we were wasting time with other crap. Thaddeus and Cinderella had that amazing scene with the chemistry, and that was kind of it. And then at the end, he like gives her the crown, and that like they only really cross paths that one time before the finale, and I'm just like, missed opportunity. Thaddeus should have had a song, right? So Hopalot should have had a song, Crumb should have had vocal moments, the Troll Sisters should have had specific vocal moments about their own life, and Cinderella and Thaddeus could have had a moment together. Like, hardly any of the main characters sung. Like, it's a musical. There was just so much wasted opportunity, especially for such talented vocalists and performers like Kurt Megger. Okay, I'm now going to tell you what I would have done differently. I'm going to paint this whole picture so you can imagine what this show could have possibly been. Okay, the show opens. We have no narrator. The dwarf Rackweed, I think his name is, he is the narrator. Okay, so we get to spend a little bit more time with him. He has a purpose as the narrator. I felt like in the show he was just like some guy who was just there. So the dwarf is our narrator. He opens the Cinderella's Castle book and he is reading the book as the narrator. He does not narrate every single scene. He's there at the start, he's there at the end, and he is there at a few key pivotal moments like when Cinderella dies or the end of Act 1 or, you know, a few key moments, but keeping it brief. We can still have the Castle on the Hill song if we want, but we really need to break it up with some information about the world. So we need to be telling the audience that this is a fantastical world where there are dwarfs, where there are trolls. We need to tell the audience, you know, in a clever, not in your face way, this is how trolls die, right? This is how you kill a troll. This is the town. This is what the town's called. This is the king's in power. He lives in this castle. So a few more details to really set up this world and the rules of the world and the rules of the magic within this world. I think that would really help in a setup, establishing, opening song. Okay, and then we meet our main character, Cinderella, and we start with this opening of the three girls getting together after many, many years of not seeing each other. And they have this wonderful time and they do the song Last Forever. And that's our opening because it was such an amazing song, right? And we see this absolute joy that Cinderella hasn't experienced in many, many years. And then they quieten down and they say, well, like, why haven't we seen you in so long? Like, what's been going on with your family? Then Cinderella tells the story of everything we need to know up until now. And in this, you could do it like shadow puppets or like come to life with actors, but she tells like the backstory that we need to know. Everything that went on with her mum, everything that went on with her dad, the whole thing about the stepmother coming in, the trolls, the skin suits. We set it all up in a song of its own so it's clear and we understand. To me, all that backstory was not clear. And when Cinderella is singing about all of this backstory and all this bad stuff that's happened to her again and again and again, maybe that is the song Cursed Crazy, right? So she's singing about all the bad stuff that happened to her mom, all the bad stuff that happened to her dad, the trolls came in, the skin suits, all this bad stuff is happening to me. I'm telling you, I'm cursed crazy, like blah, 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 blah. And then the two girls, they don't believe her, right? And because we haven't met the stepmother either, we also are like, man, this Cinderella is crazy. And, you know, it's like, she's not cursed crazy, she's cursed and crazy. And then Cinderella explains a bit more and brings the girls around, and then the girls believe her and are like, okay, we've got to get out of here. But then the stepmother character introduction comes in and kills the girls, and we meet the stepmother for the first time. And the audience is like, oh my gosh, Cinderella was telling the truth. This is absolutely horrifying. The trolls take the skin suits, and we specifically set up this idea that the trolls need the skin suits to protect themselves from the sunlight. And we also set up the idea that the trolls' goal is to take over humanity, okay? This was kind of peppered in at the end, but I would have loved to have seen at the start, right? The trolls being like, oh, this is all part of our master scheming plan to take over humanity, and give them a reason, like, why do they want to take over humanity? Is it because the humans have treated them badly? Is it because they're just power hungry? Is it because they like to eat humans? Like, why are they trying to gain this power? But to set it up. While Cinderella is then burying the bodies of her friends, we see the trolls start to learn how to use their skin suits, like I spoke about. We see a bit of a montage song of the mother teaching the two girls everything she has learned about how to fit in with the humans and their customs. And it's funny, and the sisters aren't really good at it. And we go a little bit more into their specific dreams as well, whether that's to be a riddle troll under a bridge, or the other one I think is a little bit like boy crazy and actually likes the humans and just really wants to have a boyfriend, which is kind of like lovely as well. Then we go back to Cinderella, who is burying her friends' bodies under the tree, and all of a sudden the prince comes along and has to do a poo in the river or whatever, and he like bumps into Cinderella, and it's all like anyway, then he goes to do a poo in the river, and then Cinderella and Thaddeus are there, and they have this kind of like wit and chemistry, and we see that early on in the show, okay? Don't save that for halfway through Act 2. We get it early in the show, and it's like, ooh, ooh, ooh. They run along, and then the fairy queen appears after the burying of the bodies and grants Cinderella her wishes. Okay, now the appearance of the fairy queen, that is the inciting incident. So in a story, that's what kickstarts the story. If the fairy queen never appears, Cinderella's life just stays crap and she just stays being owned by the trolls. Like nothing in her life changes. And in Cinderella's castle, the fairy queen enters for the Act 1 finale. That is far too late to be having the inciting incident. So in my version, it happens early, right? So the fairy queen comes and grants all of the wishes. Then the fairy queen asks Cinderella, what do you want? And that is when we see Cinderella sing her big, beautiful I Want song. She sings about revenge, and she sings really specifically about what she's going to do, how she's going to execute this revenge, and how she's going to bring these trolls down. I want specifics, right? She's got a plan. She's now got fairy queen to grant her wishes. She's going to make this happen. Big I Want song. So then we spend a little bit of time with the trio, Cinderella, Sir Hop-a-Lot, and Crumb the Squire. And we really get to know this dynamic a little bit. We get to spend some time seeing Sir Hop-a-Lot and Crumb interacting, and we're going to set up Crumb wanting to become a knight, and maybe something about Sir Hop-a-Lot wanting to own some land and just settle down and have kids or whatever in his old age. And in this, I would really love to see some musical moments for Sir Hop-a-Lot, and especially some musical moments for Little Crumb. But we get to know this dynamic. They're getting ready for the ball, and they're getting ready to put Cinderella's plan in action and to bring down the trolls. They're training, they're doing their sword practice, they're getting ready to go to the ball. Then they go to the ball, all of that same stuff happens, and I think in the show it's Ransilda that kind of hits it off with the prince over the blowjob joke, but I think it should be Putress, if Putress's whole thing is that she kind of loves boys and actually likes the humans. So Putress and the prince hit it off over the blowjob joke, and we kind of make more of that. Like the prince really wants Putress, and Putress really wants the prince, and it's kind of genuine. And this raises the stakes for Cinderella, because in order to succeed, she needs to steal the prince away from the trolls. So we're raising the stakes and make Cinderella work a little bit harder. We have more Thaddeus and Cinderella stuff. Maybe even I like the idea that when they first meet at the tree, Cinderella says like some certain phrase, and then when they meet and Cinderella is unrecognizable under the spell, she says that same phrase, and Thaddeus cottons on, and maybe like he's the only one that knows who it actually is, or he's got some kind of inkling. I think we definitely need a song from Thaddeus, or even like a duet between Cinderella and Thaddeus, and again to really keep exploring this really beautiful dynamic between those two. Then we have the big fight sequence that we have, and make a big deal of Crumb trying to do something to help because he really wants to be brave and be a knight, but he ends up messing up, and because of Crumb's mess up, the stepmother steals the slipper. She cottons on that it's Cinderella, just like in the show. Cinderella gets away, runs away, and that is where the Act 1 finale is, right? And you cannot tell me that is not a better place for the Act 1 finale, right? Cinderella running away from the ball, leaving the slipper, the stepmother's onto her, Crumb's failed, but it's such a great moment for an Act 1 finale. So that, in my version, is where the Act 1 finale happens. Okay, Act 2. Cinderella goes back to the house, the stepmother's onto her, and they say, you know what, this is good, we're gonna cut your leg off. So they lay her down, the same thing as the show. They cut her leg off, it's totally gross, and then Cinderella dies, and they think, let's go bury her out where we bury everybody else under that old tree. So they take Cinderella out to the tree, and they're like, you know what, we need to fully destroy this evidence just in case. So they set her on fire, and they set everything on fire, and they all leave. And then the fire goes down, and out of the fire she like rises from the ashes, and I think this will be a great opportunity back at the tree to have the fairy queen come back and see the fairy queen in Act 2, and because we're back at that location of the tree, and I think this would be a great time to like reveal that the fairy queen is actually her like mother's spirit. I think the fairy queen mother's spirit should then revive Cinderella, and this creates the coming back to life. It makes it a whole thing, rising from the ashes, the house of Ashmore, out of the fire, and also it's like her mother giving her life, and makes it a whole thing. It'll be nice, have a whole song, it'd be really beautiful. Then, same as the show, the frog and the mouse come back to life, but in doing so they're gonna kill Ransilda. Ransilda is gonna be like on her deathbed and being like, oh, riddles, like I just wanted to be a troll under the bridge. This makes Putress really, really sad, and is kind of starting to question her mother's motives, and is a little bit like, Anyway, Putress has Cinderella's legs, so her foot fits the slipper, and this is actually really good because the prince and Putris like really hit it off at the ball and they genuinely have fallen in love. So that's actually kind of works out. So Putris and the prince go off to get married, and Putris is even like, you know what, mum, like I'm not being a part of this, like this is a silly plan, like the humans are not that bad, like I'm in love with this prince, we're gonna go off and get married. And Cinderella thinks, right, okay, we've killed one of the trolls, the other troll is not a problem, she's on our side, it's just the stepmother to go. So then Cinderella, Sir Hopalot and the Squire Crumb, they plot once more about what they're gonna do, they get ready for battle, and they go to the wedding. At the wedding, there's another big fight sequence. Putris sacrifices herself in order to stop her mother, and it's really beautiful. The prince is killed, same in the show, you know, after they're wed, which is very convenient for the plot. And there's the big fight sequence, and then somehow they convince or, you know, make the stepmother angry enough to go into her troll form. Somehow they reveal the trappings of Starlight and turn her to stone, and this time Crumb does something to try and help, and previously he did that and everything went wrong, but this time he trusts his gut, he does something to try and save the day, and it's because of him and his bravery that the stepmother is then turned to stone. The finale is all the same. Cinderella becomes the queen through the lineage, whatever that happens, and then Crumb is knighted, and you know, after all the lessons I've taught you, you know, you finally did it, you saved the day, everything feels satisfying, and yeah, I just think that would have been such a great show, and to give those musical moments to those characters, to give their goals and wants and desires actual meaning. Like, I think it would have been really nice to go more into those troll sisters' desires and have it actually affect the plot. Like, oh, I really, you know, actually kind of like the humans and want a boyfriend. That affects the plot because then she turns on her mother and, you know, helps Cinderella. Things like that that would just make the payoffs a little bit more satisfying for all the time that you invest in the story. Okay, I have been talking way too long. I'm going to give a really quick conclusion. Basically, this could have been an incredible show. Amazing design, amazing performances, amazing everything, but it was just a little bit let down by being too approximate and just very medium-ish. It wasn't funny enough to me to be a comedy. It wasn't like serious enough to be a drama. It was just kind of like a bit of and I think it was relying on these shock value moments of violence, of sex, to kind of be like, oh, this is what it is, but it didn't really feel earned, it didn't really feel right, and I think that the music really contributed to this meh feeling. It really put the show on pause every time a song happened. The songs weren't really catchy enough, they weren't really integral to the story or the plot, and so many of the main characters, and the really good ones, did not sing at all, which I think is such a wasted opportunity. There are, of course, the odd exceptions of brilliance in this show, and that's what made it such a disappointing watch, because I am filled with all of the hopes and dreams of what this show could have been. As a long time Starkid fan, I'm feeling more and more with every show that is veering off and differing from what my taste is. I feel every time they do a show, I'm like, oh, it's just not hitting the same for me, and I do start to question maybe I should start to maybe care a little bit less, or not necessarily keep up to date with their every single creative move. But I can't help it. I love Starkid and I feel really connected to these artists and the art that they create. So I think for now I will keep following along, but for me it has been a little bit disappointing that their shows, in my opinion, have decreased in quality despite their resources and budget increasing. So that is all for me, and I will see you in the next video.